Have you ever witnessed an injustice so profound that it shook your faith in humanity? Imagine walking through the ancient streets of Jerusalem around 1000 BCE. The marketplace bustles with activity, but beneath the veneer of normalcy, corruption festers like an open wound. A widow stands before a judge, pleading for her inheritance that was unjustly seized, but the judge, having accepted a bribe from her opponent, dismisses her case without a second thought. In the corner, a wealthy merchant pays off officials to look the other way as he uses rigged scales. The powerful prey on the weak, and justice seems like a distant dream. What do you do when those entrusted with upholding justice become the very embodiment of injustice? Where do you turn when the systems designed to protect become weapons of oppression? This timeless question burned in the heart of David, the shepherd king of Israel, as he penned the haunting words of Psalm 58 nearly 3 millennia ago. Yet remarkably, his cry still resonates with us today. Today, we dive deep into one of the Bible's most confronting poems, Psalm 58, a raw, unfiltered cry for divine justice in a world where human justice has failed. This psalm doesn't offer gentle platitudes or comfortable reassurances. Instead, it presents us with the authentic voice of someone who has witnessed the devastating effects of unchecked corruption and cries out for cosmic accountability. The ancient scrolls tell us this was written to the chief musician, Altasheth, Miktam of David. Altasheth means do not destroy, possibly indicating it was set to a popular melody of the time. Miktam, appearing in only 6 psalms, Psalms 16 and 56-60, likely denotes a contemplative poem or prayer, one meant for deep reflection. But what was happening in David's world that provoked such intense language? To understand this, we need to travel back to ancient Israel during a turbulent period. Historical records suggest Psalm 58 likely emerged during one of 2 critical periods in David's life. The first possibility is during his years fleeing from King Saul around 1020 BCE, when he witnessed firsthand how power corrupted the monarchy he once served. Saul's jealousy had twisted the royal court's justice system against David, despite his faithful service to the kingdom. The second possibility places this psalm during Absalom's rebellion around 980 BCE, when David's own son undermined justice by stealing the hearts of the people with false promises while plotting rebellion against his father. In either scenario, David observed those in positions of power, those who should dispense justice, becoming agents of injustice. The psalm emerges from this crucible of betrayal and corruption. Let's begin with the text itself. Psalm 58 opens with a striking accusation. Do you indeed speak righteousness, O silent ones? Do you judge uprightly, O you sons of men? No, in heart you work wickedness. You weigh out the violence of your hands in the earth. Notice how David immediately confronts those who should uphold justice but remain silent. The Hebrew word for silent ones here, Elam, can also be translated as gods or mighty ones, referring to human judges or rulers who were supposed to represent divine justice on earth. This wordplay is intentional, highlighting the gap between their divine responsibility and their earthly corruption. David doesn't mince words. He directly challenges these authorities. Are you actually delivering justice as you claim? And then immediately answers his own question. No, in your hearts, you plot wickedness. This accusation would have been shocking to its original audience. In ancient Near Eastern cultures, judges and rulers often claimed divine authority for their decisions. To suggest they were corrupt at heart was to challenge the very foundation of societal order. The psalm continues with a profound insight into the nature of injustice. The wicked are estranged from the womb. They go astray as soon as they are born, speaking lies. Their poison is like the poison of a serpent. They are like the deaf cobra that stops its ear, which will not heed the voice of charmers, charming ever so skillfully. Here, David employs powerful metaphors to describe the entrenched nature of this corruption. He's not merely suggesting these leaders made a few bad decisions. He's pointing to a fundamental moral distortion that seems present from birth. The image of a venomous snake that refuses to be charmed illustrates how these corrupt officials are immune to reason, appeals to conscience, or calls for reform. This passage has sparked theological debates for centuries. Is David suggesting some people are born morally defective? Most biblical scholars understand this as hyperbolic language expressing moral outrage rather than a literal statement about human nature. The poetic device emphasizes how deeply ingrained corrupt patterns become when left unchecked. Professor Walter Brueggemann of Columbia Theological Seminary notes that this language expresses the psychological truth that corruption, once embraced, becomes second nature. In this ancient world, without formal checks and balances or separation of powers, corrupt leadership meant devastating consequences for the vulnerable. Archaeological findings from this period reveal stark disparities in wealth distribution, suggesting systematic exploitation that aligns with the biblical narratives of injustice. The psalm then takes a dramatic turn as David calls for divine intervention. "Break their teeth in their mouth, O God. Break out the fangs of the young lions, O Lord. Let them flow away as waters which run continually. When he bends his bow, let his arrows be as if cut in pieces. Let them be like a snail which melts away as it goes, like a stillborn child of a woman, that they may not see the sun." This language is admittedly shocking to modern ears. David's graphic imagery, broken teeth, melting snails, stillborn children, represents some of the Bible's most confrontational language. Yet understanding this passage requires cultural and literary context. The language belongs to a specific genre known as imprecatory prayer, found throughout ancient Near Eastern literature. These were not calls for personal revenge, but appeals to divine justice when human justice failed. In societies without robust legal recourse for the oppressed, these prayers represented the last hope for accountability. Dr. Tremper Longman III, Old Testament scholar at Westmont College, explains, "These imprecations are not expressions of personal vengeance but passionate appeals for God to act as the ultimate judge when human judges fail." The vivid imagery serves a rhetorical purpose, to emphasize the urgency and severity of the situation. Importantly, we must recognize that David isn't taking matters into his own hands. He doesn't advocate vigilante violence or revolution. Instead, he places judgment in God's hands, a crucial distinction. This acknowledges both human limitations in achieving perfect justice and the belief in ultimate divine accountability. The imagery continues with environmental metaphors. "Before your pots can feel the burning thorns, he shall take them away as with a whirlwind, as in his living and burning wrath." This likely refers to desert travelers who would gather thorns to make cooking fires. Before the thorns could fully heat their cooking pots, sudden windstorms might sweep everything away. Similarly, David envisions divine judgment coming suddenly and completely upon those who pervert justice. The psalm concludes with a powerful statement of hope and divine justice. "The righteous shall rejoice when he sees the vengeance. He shall wash his feet in the blood of the wicked. So that men will say, surely there is a reward for the righteous. Surely he is God who judges in the earth." Again, the graphic imagery reflects ancient Near Eastern victory language, not literal bloodthirst. The point is vindication, the assurance that justice will ultimately prevail. The final verse reveals the psalm's true purpose, not personal revenge, but the restoration of faith and divine justice when human justice fails. This raises profound questions for us today. How do we respond to systemic injustice? What recourse remains when those entrusted with justice become perpetrators of injustice? Throughout history, Psalm 58 has provided voice to the voiceless. During the African American civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s, these imprecatory psalms gained new relevance. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., though famous for his nonviolent approach, understood the power of righteous indignation expressed in these ancient texts. In his letter from Birmingham jail, dated April 16, 1963, he drew inspiration from prophetic traditions that called out injustice without mincing words. Similarly, during the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa from the 1960s through the 1990s, theologian Alan Bozak found in these psalms a divine sanction for opposing systemic injustice. The Psalms provided language for those facing brutal oppression to express their pain while still maintaining faith in ultimate justice. The Psalm invites us to confront uncomfortable realities about power and corruption. Throughout human history, from ancient Mesopotamia to modern governance, power has demonstrated its capacity to corrupt. Lord Acton's famous 1887 observation that power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, finds its biblical precedent in psalms like this one. Yet Psalm 58 goes beyond merely identifying corruption. It makes the radical claim that justice is not merely a human construct but reflects divine values. When human systems fail, the psalm insists, cosmic justice remains. This perspective challenges both ancient and modern assumptions. In the ancient world, many believed justice was whatever powerful rulers decreed. The revolutionary idea that rulers themselves answered to a higher standard of justice represented a radical democratization of moral authority. Even kings were accountable. In our modern world, where many view justice as merely a social contract or cultural construction, Psalm 58 challenges us to consider whether justice might have deeper foundations. As philosopher Nicholas Wolterstorff argues in his 2008 work, Justice, Rights and Wrongs, the biblical tradition grounds human rights not in changeable social agreements but in the inherent worth humans possess as divine image-bearers. But practical questions remain. How do we apply this ancient text today? Does it justify violence against corrupt officials? The historical evidence suggests otherwise. The psalm doesn't actually advocate human violence against corrupt authorities. Rather, it represents a verbal protest that leaves vengeance to God. This approach aligns remarkably with nonviolent resistance movements throughout history. When Mahatma Gandhi led nonviolent protests against British colonial rule in the early 20th century, he distinguished between opposing unjust systems and harboring hatred toward individuals within those systems. The psalm teaches us to name injustice plainly without euphemism, to call corruption what it is. Yet it also warns against taking judgment into our own hands. This balanced approach provides wisdom for confronting systemic injustice today. Consider how contemporary whistleblowers embody this delicate balance. When individuals expose corruption within powerful institutions, whether government agencies, corporations, or religious organizations, they name injustice plainly, often at great personal cost. Yet they typically work through proper channels rather than pursuing vigilante justice. Their actions reflect the psalm's core wisdom: confront corruption truthfully while respecting proper authority. The relevance of Psalm 58 extends beyond political corruption. Consider how its principles apply to other realms where power can corrupt. In business ethics, the psalm challenges executives to recognize their accountability beyond shareholder value. When corporate leaders at companies like Enron, which collapsed in 2001 after massive accounting fraud, prioritized profit over integrity, the consequences destroyed lives. The psalm reminds us that economic power carries moral responsibility. In religious institutions, the psalm warns against abusing spiritual authority. The Catholic Church's sexual abuse scandals, extensively documented in the 2002 Boston Globe investigation, represent a modern example of authority figures betraying sacred trust. The psalm reminds religious leaders that they answer to the divine justice they claim to represent. In family systems, the psalm confronts domestic tyrants who abuse power within household hierarchies. The worldwide epidemic of domestic violence, affecting nearly 1 in 3 women globally according to World Health Organization statistics released in 2021, often thrives in environments where power imbalances go unchallenged. The psalm insists that even private injustice faces divine accountability. In each context, Psalm 58's message remains consistent. Power requires accountability, and when human accountability fails, divine justice remains. But the psalm also raises questions about our own complicity in systems of injustice. Before pointing fingers at corrupt officials, we might ask, do our own actions contribute to unjust systems? Do we benefit from inequities we conveniently ignore? Do we remain silent when speaking out would cost us? The Jewish tradition of teshuvah, repentance, reminds us that confronting injustice begins with self-examination. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who marched with Dr. King at Selma on March 21, 1965, famously said, "In a free society, some are guilty, but all are responsible." This wisdom echoes Psalm 58's call for moral clarity, beginning with honest self-assessment. The Psalm's unflinching language also raises questions about our emotional responses to injustice. In contemporary discourse, we often suppress righteous anger in favor of detached analysis. Yet throughout history, moral progress has frequently required the emotional energy of righteous indignation. When William Wilberforce campaigned against the British slave trade in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, he combined meticulous research with moral passion. His speeches before Parliament didn't minimize slavery's horrors with dispassionate language. Similarly, when Harriet Beecher Stowe published Uncle Tom's Cabin in 1852, she intentionally evoked emotional responses to slavery's cruelty. Both recognize that moral clarity sometimes requires emotional engagement. Psalm 58 validates the emotional dimension of confronting injustice. It gives voice to the righteous anger that fuels reform without allowing that anger to justify personal vengeance. This balanced approach offers wisdom for contemporary justice movements. The psalm also speaks to our longing for ultimate justice. In a world where corruption often goes unpunished and victims die without vindication, Psalm 58 articulates hope for final accountability. This hope has sustained countless sufferers throughout history. During the Cambodian genocide of 1975 to 1979, when Pol Pot's Khmer Rouge regime murdered approximately 1.5 to 2 million people, many victims had no reasonable expectation of earthly justice. Similarly, during the Holocaust from 1941 to 1945, many who perished in Nazi concentration camps died without seeing their persecutors held accountable. For those suffering such ultimate injustices, the hope of divine justice represented not an abstract theological concept but an essential lifeline of meaning. Even in less extreme circumstances, unresolved injustices accumulate throughout human lives. The employee fired after reporting harassment who never sees vindication. The child abused by a respected community figure who is never believed. The indigenous peoples whose lands were stolen through broken treaties that courts refused to honor. For these and countless others, Psalm 58's insistence on ultimate justice provides dignity when human systems fail. Yet the psalm doesn't merely offer distant hope for future justice. It also makes the radical claim that recognizing divine justice changes our present reality. So that men will say, "Surely there is a reward for the righteous. Surely he is God who judges in the earth." This conclusion suggests that divine justice doesn't operate only in some future realm but manifests in the earth. This perspective transforms how we understand both suffering and resistance. When the civil rights activists faced police brutality during the 1965 Selma to Montgomery marches, many found strength in believing their actions participated in a larger cosmic justice. When South African anti-apartheid activists endured imprisonment and torture through the 1970s and 1980s, many drew courage from seeing their struggle as aligned with divine purposes. This perspective didn't eliminate suffering but transformed its meaning. Psalm 58's relevance continues in contemporary justice movements. When activists confront systemic racism, environmental degradation, human trafficking, or other injustices, they often draw strength from believing their cause aligns with deeper moral realities. The psalm validates this intuition, suggesting that working for justice means participating in divine purpose. The psalm also offers wisdom about how justice ultimately prevails. Notice that David doesn't prescribe specific judicial reforms or political strategies. Instead, he recognizes that corrupted systems often resist internal reform. Sometimes justice arrives only through dramatic intervention that fundamentally transforms existing structures. History confirms this insight. The abolition of American slavery didn't come through gradual reform, but required the cataclysmic intervention of the Civil War from 1861 to 1865. The fall of European fascism in 1945 didn't occur through diplomatic negotiations, but through the Allied forces' decisive military victory. The end of South African apartheid in the early 1990s came not through minor adjustments, but through comprehensive transformation of the political system. Psalm 58's apocalyptic imagery, sudden whirlwinds, cosmic reversals, acknowledges that entrenched injustice sometimes requires transformative intervention rather than incremental change. This wisdom remains relevant for confronting systemic injustices today. Yet importantly, the psalm locates this transformative power not in human violence but in divine action. This distinction remains crucial. Throughout history, revolutionaries claiming to establish justice have sometimes created new forms of oppression. The French Revolution's reign of terror in 1793 to 1794, Stalin's Soviet purges in the 1930s, and Mao's Cultural Revolution from 1966 to 1976 all demonstrate how human attempts to establish perfect justice through violence often create new injustices. Psalm 58's approach offers a different path, naming injustice truthfully while entrusting ultimate judgment to divine hands. This balance provides wisdom for justice seekers throughout history and today. As we conclude our exploration of this challenging psalm, let's consider its enduring relevance. In a world where corruption still flourishes, where powerful figures still abuse authority, where victims still cry out for justice, Psalm 58 provides language for naming injustice without euphemism, emotional validation for righteous indignation, wisdom for avoiding vigilantism while confronting corruption, hope for ultimate accountability beyond human systems, perspective that transforms present suffering by connecting it to cosmic justice. This ancient text, written in a world so different from our own, still speaks with remarkable clarity to contemporary concerns. Its unflinching moral vision challenges both ancient and modern assumptions about power, justice, and accountability. Perhaps most importantly, Psalm 58 reminds us that justice is not merely a human construction but reflects something fundamental about reality itself. This perspective offers both comfort and challenge. Comfort to victims that their suffering matters beyond human recognition, and challenge to perpetrators that no human power ultimately escapes accountability. As we navigate the complexities of justice in our own time, this ancient wisdom continues to illuminate our path. When we witness corruption in high places, when the powerful seem to escape accountability, when victims cry out without answer, Psalm 58 reminds us, justice may be delayed, but it will not be denied. In a world of broken systems and imperfect accountability, this psalm offers not easy answers but enduring hope, hope that sustains resistance, fuels reform, and gives meaning to suffering. Its ancient voice still speaks, calling us to both moral clarity and patient trust that ultimately, justice will prevail. Before you go, I want to personally invite you to be part of our growing community here at Prayer Universe. If this video touched your heart or brought you peace, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a prayer or message that can uplift your spirit. But most importantly, I'd love to hear from you. In the comments below, share just one word or phrase of motivation that this video inspired in you, whether it's hope, gratitude, peace, or something else. Your words matter deeply to us because they help guide the content we create for this channel. Together, let's build a space filled with faith, encouragement, and connection. Thank you for being here, and remember, every prayer counts. See you in the next one.